Hi, I'm Mike Thornton, and in this video we're going to cover in detail how to set up and use each of the instruments that only come in RTW Mastering Tools. If you want to know more about the instruments that are in both Loudness Tools and Mastering Tools, the PPM, Loudness Sum, Loudness Numeric, Loudness Range and Stereo Correlator instruments, then please watch that video. In this video, we're going to cover in detail the Vectorscope, Surround Sound Analyzer, Realtime Analyzer, and the Multichannel version of the Correlator instrument, as Loudness Tools only has a Stereo Correlator instrument. Let's start with an empty window so we can more easily explore each of the instruments available only in Mastering Tools by going back to the default preset in the Pro Tools Presets menu. To access the dock, click on the RTW in the center of the bottom frame and the dock will pop up. Notice that when you move the mouse away from the bottom of the window, the dock is hidden, and bringing the mouse back down to the bottom will reveal the dock. To start, let's pull out an instance of the Multichannel Correlator instrument and then resize it to the plugin window. The multi-correlator instrument displays the phase relationship between the channels of all possible channel pairs on the phase meters, which are graphically placed in a speaker setup for the appropriate surround mode, or between each single channel and the LFE channel. As with any correlator meter, the meters should not go into the negative red side for extended periods, as this shows there's significant out-of-phase components, which is likely to end up with the loss of audio or LFE problems in bass management when generating a downmix. As with any phase meter, a green display shows varying amounts of identical audio on both channels. When it's full scale on the green side, the signals are identical. With no indication, so around the center zero point, that shows that there are independent signals on the pair of channels in question, i.e. no correlation. And then indications into the red on the negative side shows varying amounts of identical audio on both channels, but out of phase. Clicking on the gear wheel shows the settings for the multi-correlator. The normal setting on the mode switch displays the phase meters with all available channel pairs except the LFE channel laid out around a speaker setup, in this case 5.1. The LFE mode shows the phase relationships between each channel and the LFE channel, so it uses the LFE channel as a reference and then displays the phase relationship between the LFE and each of the other channels. As this instance is a 5.1 track, we have 5 meters, one for each channel. There is a key module for this instrument, and so, as before, a second drag from the instrument's icon in the dock produces a keys module with buttons to switch between normal and LFE modes. So let's clear the window again and look at the Surround Sound Analyzer instrument, or SSA for short. The SSA visualizes the balance of stereo or surround programs intuitively at a glance. It includes phantom source indicators, phase correlation meters for each channel pair, and a dominance indicator. The Surround Sound Analyzer instrument displays the interaction of the audio in the surround field with a dynamic visualization laid out in a speaker setup. Let's look at each section in turn. The main part of the graphical display is the total program volume, or TVI for short. On these axes, it displays the volume of the single channels as small white bar graphs. The area enclosed by the lines connecting the tips of these bar graphs is a measure for the total volume level, and the way it spreads out gives a visual representation of the balance of the surround content. The yellow dynamic line shows the presence of the center channel. The shape of the lines between the speakers displays the correlation between the respective channels. Let's take a look at some snapshots to show what I mean. If there's a funnel or a dip, That represents a red display on a normal phase meter. The deeper the dip, the more out-of-phase components there are. A straight line is equivalent to a phase meter displaying around the center zero. So if you get a peak or a roof, then this is equivalent to the green display on a phase meter. Round the sides of this instrument, there are phantom sound indicators, or PSI for short, which show the location of the phantom image, width and correlation in one display. You can turn them on or off from the SSA settings tab. Let's take a closer look at how these work. The dot shows the position of the phantom image between the left and right surround channels. The length of the bar shows the width or spread. The longer the bar, the wider the image. And then the color indicates the phase, with green showing in-phase correlation, yellow no correlation, and red showing out-of-phase correlation. The dominance indicator, or DMI for short, is a cross which displays the position of the dominant sound in the surround mix, i.e. where in the room the strongest element of the mix would appear to be coming from. If you like, the surround equivalent of a phantom image. In the SSA settings tab, there are two main modes for the surround sound analyzer: classic and loudness. In classic mode, the red markers on these lines are scaled to the reference sound pressure level. So when the studio monitors are calibrated, say, for a film dubbing theatre to provide 85 dBA at the mix position, the red line is a visual indicator that the audio will be at the reference SPL level when the display hits the red lines, and the distance between the marks is 10 dB. In the loudness mode, the red line equates to the target loudness for the loudness specification for the selected standard. So for ATSC A85, that would be -24 LKFS. You can enable the correlator option, which will add a multi-channel correlator to this instrument, so can save screen real estate. And of course, these phase meters function exactly the same as those in the multi-channel correlator instrument. But back to the SSA, the LFE phase, when enabled, will light up in the lower section of the SSA if the correlation between one single channel and the LFE channel reads negative or red. Normally, the warning signal only lights up temporarily, but if it lights up for longer periods of time, or worse still, permanently, it's showing that there's a lot of out-of-phase components between the LFE channel and that single channel. At which point, we suggest you investigate further using the LFE mode of the multi-correlator instrument. With the SSA, there is a key module which you can drag out from the dock, and the key module enables you to turn on or off the PSI, DMI, and correlators to save you having to open the settings window to turn these options on or off. So let's clear the window again, and this time we're going to open the Realtime Analyzer Instrument, or RTA for short. And this displays the spectral content of the input channels using 31, 61 or 122 bands in 3rd octave, 6th octave or 12 octave steps. It is effectively measuring the signal level for each frequency band. There is also an additional H band which shows spectral signal components above 20 kHz. But of course you need to be working at higher sample rates like 96 or 192K to see this option working. In the bars section, the first option is filter, from which we can choose 3rd, 6th or 12th octave steps. Frequency range comes next, and the LF option displays from 5 Hz to 5K, so you can focus on these lower frequencies. Normal will display from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Below is where you can enable that extra H bar that can display content above 20 kHz, But of course, if you're working at 44.1 or 48K, there's no real point in having this option enabled, so we can turn it off. Bar layout enables you to have the bars working independently and is the default setting. Group displays the bars together in groups of 3, and block removes the gaps between the bars in groups of 3. You can set the colours for the 3 zones, over, normal and peak hold if you prefer different colours. Moving on to the measurement section, you can choose which channel or combination of channels the RTA instrument will display. In this case, on a 5.1 track, we have the option of all without LFE, front, left and right, or each of the individual channels. When there's more than one channel, the display shows the sum of all the chosen channels. Weighting filter gives you a choice between flat, A or C weighting. Ballistics affects the way the meter responds to the audio and can be set from impulse to peak. Resolution controls the vertical resolution of the RTA, and you can choose from 3, 6 or 9 dB steps. Ref changes the reference point for the RTA, but effectively enables you to get the action in the middle of the instrument. If the level is too low or too high, so you can adjust the ref control so that the display is in the middle of the screen. Peak hold is where you can control how long the peak hold indicators in the bars will stay on for. Manual will leave them displaying their highest point until the reset button is pressed. The peak hold mode determines whether the peak hold indicators on each of the bars work independently, or on the fixed internal settings, all peak hold indicators reset together. As with most of the instruments, the RTA instrument also has a set of buttons which we can pull out of the dock. But notice how the shaded area is red, denoting that the button module will not fit in the space available. So to make enough room, I need to resize the RTA instrument, and then when I try again, there's enough space. Let's enable all the buttons and see what the options are. We can control the resolution between 3 and 9 dB steps. We can change the range between normal and low. Next, we have a peak hold reset button and 2 buttons that we can use to adjust the reference up and down. Finally, we have a display hold button which enables us to freeze the display. Let's clear the RTA and its buttons from the window and look at the last instrument in Mastering Tools, the Audio Vectorscope Instrument, or VSC for short. The VSC displays the phase relationship as a Lissajous display between 2 channels in real time. It can be used to evaluate the width of a stereo signal, or if there are any comb filter effects or phase shifts or rotations in the signal. First is the channel mode. In 2-channel mode, you can determine which 2 channels the VST is looking at from the input menu that pops up. And you can see that you can choose from a full range of adjacent channels. In 4-channel mode, it effectively looks front and back by dividing the display in 2. So the top half is looking at the front left and right, and the bottom half is looking at the left surround and right surround, so it gives a kind of quad type of display. Note that the Vectorscope is not input level dependent. It has an AGC so that the level into the display is consistent. The AGC option here enables you to switch the AGC release between fast and slow. In stereo mode, you can switch the grid between diagonal left-right lines, left and right, and the horizontal and vertical MS lines, mid and side. And this is really helpful if you're either looking at MS content or processing audio using MS techniques. The grid line can be changed from fine, where they're displayed as dots, to coarse, where the grid lines are displayed as a line. You can also adjust the colours of the grid and the waveforms to suit your own personal preference. There is a button module for the Vectorscope, which enables you to be able to switch between the 2 and 4 channel modes and to change the grid lines between left-right and MS. So that's our detailed look at each of the instruments that are only available in RTW Mastering Tools. Now let's take a look at some of the presets that are in Mastering Tools. We'll start with the 6-channel SSA preset. This actually has way more than just the surround sound analyzer instrument. As you can see, we have a true peak meter on the left, then across the top the surround sound analyzer with a button module, and then a 4-channel Vectorscope. And below there's an RTA instrument in 6th octave mode. Next we have the TASA Cinema Loudness preset, which is set up for the TASA Standard Cinema Trailer volume. TASA stands for the Trailer Audio Standards Association, and their standard employs a measurement technique called LEQM that quantifies the sound with an emphasis on the frequencies that are most annoying to audiences. Because tests have shown that not all loud signals irritate the audience to the same extent. The irritability of sounds to an audience is both frequency and duration specific. For example, breaking glass at 85 dB is far more irritating to the audience than a foghorn at 85 dBA. So rather than simply measuring volume, the standard seeks to measure the annoying volume. And the current upper limit is LEQM 85. So although this looks like a standard BS 1770 preset, if we go into the system settings, you can see that the loudness type and scale are set to TASA. The target is disabled because it's fixed at 85 LEQ. And notice how the tolerances are set differently too, with 6 for the momentary, 5 for the short term, and no tolerance for the integrated meter. Let's close that and go back into the presets and select TASA Mastering. Notice that there is a loudness numeric instrument displaying the key data for the TASA standard. Finally, let's look at the Mastering preset. This is set up to provide all the tools that you need to master a BS 1770 program. We have the PPM instrument set to read true peak on the left, then an SSA and loudness numeric instruments across the top, and a 4-channel Vectorscope and loudness sum instruments along the bottom. If we go into the settings and go to the loudness section of the system settings, we can see that it's configured to the EBU R128 standard. But of course we could change that to ATSC A85 and then do a save as so that we've got 2 versions of the preset, one for R128 and the other for ATSC A85. Another standard covered by the RTW meters is the SAWA standard for cinema adverts. And again, there are loudness and mastering presets for this standard, just like the TASA standard. Switching over to a 2-channel instance of Mastering Tools, there's one last preset that I want to show you, and that is the 2-channel preset for CD mastering. Notice first that there are no loudness instruments in use in this preset, but let's take a closer look. Starting with the PPM instrument on the left-hand side, if we go into the settings for this instrument, we can see that it is a sample peak limiter where the maximum is 0 dB full scale. Next, we have a 2-channel Vectorscope. To the right on the top, we have a 2-channel correlator to display the phase relationship of the stereo audio. Beneath that is a loudness numeric instrument, but this is set to only display the true peak level. To finish up, we have an RTA instrument in 12th octave mode so we can view the spectral distribution of the audio. So you can see that these same tools can be used for a wide range of applications, from radio to film and from CD mastering to broadcast loudness. And because RTW have made sure that there is no difference between the plugins and the hardware meters, all this translates from the plugins to the hardware meters and back to the plugins.